Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Higgins, licensed psychologist and relationship coach. And this is the Empowered Relationship Podcast, where we explore how to cultivate connection and more secure functioning in love. Today, we are exploring how our relationship with time, individually and as a couple, can either create burnout or become a source of strength. If you'd like to strengthen your relationship with more clarity and care, download the free relationship guide, 12 Relationship Principles to Strengthen Your Love, to practice the foundations of secure, lasting connection. You'll find powerful ways to deepen trust, improve communication, and keep love alive. Before we get started, I want to invite you to take a moment of pause. Perhaps joining me in a deep inhale and a deep exhale. Giving yourself a moment to settle, perhaps release tension, and become more connected in this very moment. Let's get started in today's episode. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I am looking forward to our conversation. I know many people, myself included, wrestle with the sense of time, and you have a lot to say around how we relate to time, how to spend it, how to organize ourselves as it relates to all the demands. And before we dive into our topic, you've been really clear about your story and would love for you to share a little bit more around how this became a focus for you. I know you were an attorney, a lawyer, and you shifted into burnout prevention and really helping people look at their relationship with time to optimize their success and their fulfillment in life. Where would you like to begin here?
Okay, I found myself about 10 years ago with an autoimmune diagnosis. That really was the big trigger. I had had a moment, and I say a moment, years of burnout where I had really just I was a solo practitioner attorney. I had left a big firm environment. So I'd left an environment where I learned to work in a very detail-oriented, very professional way. And I went into my own practice, and I did that with, you don't have the same level of support.
Right.
With technology, there's a lot more you can do, and I was in an area of law where I really could practice without a lot of support. I had times where I had a paralegal, I had times where I didn't, but in the long run, I found myself in a position where the workload was controllable. The pressure came adding on volunteer work that was intended initially as a way to market, but turned into a way to escape my relationship, to be honest. I was in a really emotionally abusive marriage. And when I started my practice, I was spending 4 days a week after work going to meetings. I was on boards. I ended up being an elected member of a village council where I live. I was doing volunteer work that literally was like a second full-time job. And I'd get home at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night and, wake up and start the next day. And then I was making a point of taking Fridays or Mondays off so that we could have 3-day weekends on our boat. And I would give my ex-husband focused time during those times. But it was just all a lot. So I got out of the burnout rut, in part, frankly, you're a relationship podcast, but seriously, by leaving a really bad relationship, which went through therapy and the whole thing. And sadly, when people aren't willing to get help, it doesn't work out well when they need it. So ultimately, I left, and I ended up working to fill the gaps.
Oh my goodness.
And then I started to feel hit a point where I got very resentful about this. I felt like my career as a lawyer had taken away a lot of things. I was giving my time to my clients. I was giving my time to my community. I had given my time to my ex-husband, and I felt like an empty shell of a person that when you get burned out, you kind of become dead inside and you stop seeing the good parts of life. You literally can't see it. So I put together a program to help lawyers. This was back in like 2019. And I presented that at some ABA functions, and it's being sold as a continuing education program out of a place in New York. Then I decided I really wanted to reach to a bigger audience because it's not just lawyers who have these problems.
Yes.
And I thought about who was I when I was the person who didn't know yet that these problems were brewing. And what I realized was that I thought I had a time management problem early on. I had gotten into this point where I felt like I was spinning my wheels. I'd go to work and I just wasn't getting things done and I couldn't figure out why. And I was self-employed, so I wasn't going to get fired for it. But the fact was my productivity was way off. And it probably was because of the burnout, not because of any productivity issue that was real. I mean, it's real, but it's not about time management 100%. But the first thing I did when I thought I had a problem was buy a time management course.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized, like, okay, that person I was when I didn't know what the problem was somebody who thought I had a time management problem.
Yeah.
So I created a program that's about time, but it's really about maximizing our life to make it the best time we can have. The most productive, the happiest, the most connected, the most joyful. And I looked at all the ways that, what are all the things I did that got me to this place? And that's what the art of bending time does. It kind of pulls all that stuff together and creates a way that instead of time being like a ruler that's a flat, one-dimensional, linear measurement, you're making it more like a balloon around a ruler where you can make it bigger. And you can get more connection. You can reach wider into your community, for instance, and build a team and make things happen in a better way through those synergies.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so much around how this emerged for you. And it sounded like there were some really important indicators and significant domains of your life that were not working or feeling greatly problematic in certain ways, and you were getting warning signals and
Oh, yeah.
made some changes, and even still it resulted in you really making some significant changes and continuing to really optimize or fine tune that in a way. And then it sounds like you're pivoting into this concept or framework that you developed, the art of bending time. So, and it sounds like in a bigger context, it's really helping people have a sense of wholeness inside themselves, that they don't feel that time is imposed on them, that they can be in time and space from more of this health and wellness. Is that right?
I couldn't have said it better myself. One of the things that I really like to say to people is that we are whole people living whole lives. And one of the things that I get very frustrated with is this concept of work-life balance, because it forces us to chop our lives into little boxes. And when we put our parts of our lives into little boxes, we're literally hiding parts of ourselves from the people we love, hiding our relationships outside of work from the people we work with. So nobody gets to see our whole self. And we don't get to use those parts of ourselves that sometimes are really awesome and that make us happy and have joy.
Hmm. That's super important. I mean, just even the framework there that we have to be our professional selves, or we're in this work mode and then we don't access parts of ourselves. And then conversely, in our private world or more intimate spaces, we don't access maybe some of our professional skill sets and really there the whole time.
And I mean, one thing that I saw a lot of when I was still involved and engaged in lawyer community stuff was that spouses were not treated well at professional events. So a couple of times I went with my ex-husband, who was a chef, to a lawyer event that I attended almost every year in Arizona. And after he went twice, he was like, I'm not going to this again. I don't want to go. And he loved the trips to Arizona. I was like, so why don't you want to go? And he's like, I go to these cocktail parties, and when these people, they look at me and the first thing they say is, are you a lawyer too? And then some of them, literally, I saw them do it after he mentioned it to me. they would literally physically turn their body away from him, like to shut him out of the conversation because they didn't know what to say to him. And they didn't want to talk about anything but law. They'd gotten so wrapped up in that they couldn't think beyond that. And part of what I do with the art of bending time, and this is where we get into stuff related to relationship, is help people to understand that what we're doing professionally can be enhanced by having connections outside of your office, outside of your field, so to speak.
And that's a
Because
paradigm shift. So I have a question, Michelle, as you're laying out the professional lawyer life and how you were operating success driven, you also had a relationship that you allocated, even though the dynamics weren't healthy per se. However, you still allocated a significant amount of time investing in that relationship, that marriage. So for someone listening, it sounds as though with your shifting your focus and your paradigm, the way you shifted to one who's looking at it from a place of quantifying, it sounds like you added a lot to your so-called schedule in that you now were exercising and you were eating more clean, which stereotypically isn't convenient eating. And thus, it makes a little bit more like whole foods or cooking, or like these things are time intensive. And then, these synergistic kind of relationship connections that you're recommending and the meditation and the well-being, I'm all for it. Like you're talking to someone who very much this is part of their core values. And also for someone listening, that's like, okay, relationship to time, who feels this sense of pressure and the competing needs, whether or not they're just their occupation or profession or their relationship or their children and family and domestic life. I can keep adding on.
right.
Can you help how the art of bending time and how you were describing, if we bring our whole self, then it's a different dynamic. Can you help us understand that a little more?
Absolutely. Let me start with one of the first things I do with people is I help them identify what I call as the sparks that light them up. And that is not getting a new outfit or going to a fancy dinner or a safari in Africa. That is smelling the coffee in the morning, going for a walk and feeling the breeze on your skin or the sunshine on your face, or seeing, a squirrel run up a tree, or playing with your kid and having that beautiful moment between you. And everybody has these things that light them up. Everybody's different. So one thing I encourage everybody to do is find those sparks that light you up, find what kinds of things. You might be super physical and just moving your body gets you kind of out of a rut and makes you feel better. So everybody has things that help them that way, that make them feel good, that give their core that sense of life that it needs. I treat this like fuel. You want to strive to get microdoses of these things and do it proactively once you figure out what they are, so that you're having them in your personal life, you're having them at work, you're having them throughout your day, and they kind of help you stay up. They help you stay happier. They help you stay a little more on task and a little more motivated.
And more whole. I'm imagining it's nourishing the wholeness. As you're describing this, I love your articulation and also the pacing of this, how it's integrated, and this is seemingly so on point with what you're
So
describing.
that's like the first most important primary concept.
Okay.
The second one is making sure that you are physically and mentally sufficiently healthy to get into and maintain a flow state. So that means getting sleep, getting uninterrupted sleep without your phone in your bedroom, pinging text messages and your brain half on, listening to it. It means drinking enough water, being hydrated. The impact of hydration is huge. People don't realize how massively huge it is. Just drinking enough water can make a difference for people and making sure they have the right electrolyte level. Eating, I'm going to say reasonably healthy. I tell people eat the rainbow. Make sure you're getting enough fruits and vegetables and you're eating different colors of things and you're eating real food. Then there are, you want to exercise. And when I say exercise, I mean move your body,
Mm-hmm.
walk a decent amount, or get up and move yourself around every hour or so while you're at your office, or take a walking meeting once in a while if that's possible. Lift some weights. We want strength, flexibility, and some cardio, but, at a minimum, move your body. And you want to be able to stay in a reasonably low stress mode, because stress, as we know, spikes cortisol, spikes insulin. Like, you end up with metabolic issues tied to stress. You can have chronic inflammation. You can have all kinds of things tied to stress. So you want to do these things that help de-stress you and keep you focused. And, they help you stay on task. They help you stay, if you're in a flow state, you get things done better, faster. And I
Mm-hmm.
say better, you're going to be more accurate if you're in a flow state than you are if you're distracted.
It almost sounds like
So,
that's the side effect, like that you're really
yeah,
recommending.
think about it. How much time did people waste fixing the mistake they made because they were scattered and they were in a hurry?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How much time do they waste because they can't find their keys? Because they're distractible and they're brain foggy because they're not healthy. Literally, they're not healthy, and that's why those things are happening.
Would you say that the recommendations that you're offering, again, some of which people are familiar with, the priority is on wellness, and that time what will get done will get done. Like sometimes the old school model, I remember in undergrad, speaking of different programs, I remember feeling like I almost had this pressure and this worry of like, oh, I don't have enough time for all these papers and exams. And it was kind of like this priority of these grades matter more than anything. And then
Right.
I caught myself and I remember shifting my narrative to I have all the time that I need, which it wasn't what I actually believed, but it was
It's
kind
the
of
same amount of time, right? But it's your attitude.
and I also was just prioritizing like I am living this. I need to show up for it. And like, it just feels more like I get to breathe versus this constriction of like, blah, like panic and worry that it's like I'm not going to finish or be able to accomplish the goal.
Yeah.
And if you're inviting people to shift their priority to their wholeness and wellness, then time is a space they're living in, but it's not time is more important and the productivity is more important.
So a lot of what this is about prioritizing.
Okay.
When you have those, you know what lights you up, you know what matters to you, you know what your values are. You have a sense of my family comes first, or my career comes first, or I care about helping my community with X, Y, or Z, or, right now taking care of my mom is the most important thing that I can be doing because I don't know how long I'll have her in my life anymore. Whatever that priority is for you,
Hmm.
you want to look at those priorities and put the things, all that stuff in through a filter, right? And there are things that, we can do. One of the things, like I said, being able to be just capable of being focused is one thing that helps
Hmm.
you get more done more effectively in the time that you spend doing the thing. But you also need to think about which things should you be putting your time into.
Hmm. Absolutely. So you're not usually talking to the person that's like, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead, that kind of thing.
That may be how they are now because they're like, but they're like, something's wrong. I feel burned out. I'm not happy. Or I've gone through this big change, or,
They're more primed for change because they're
because
recognizing,
they realize they're killing themselves.
yes,
They don't really know what to do about it. And there's a lot of people like that.
yeah.
And, who are like trapped. They feel like I'm trapped. I don't know what to do. I mean, that's classic burnout. Somebody who's, they're an entrepreneur or they're an executive and they've worked up to a certain level. But classic for executives, they haven't learned how to truly delegate. They micromanage everything.
Yeah.
They feel personally responsible for everything, which is obviously you are responsible. But part of building a great team is developing a team that you can count on. And I had a wonderful mentor when I was working in DC in my first law job. And he said to me one day, he said, Michelle, when I'm in a meeting with the lawyers I've hired in my law firm, I'm the dumbest guy in the room and I want it that way.
Nice.
And that was his attitude. He's like, I'm the dumbest guy in the room and I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. I want Supreme Court clerks in my firm. I don't want people like me.
And then also, if you're paying someone to do it, you want them to educate you or educate you.
Well, but I mean, he hired really, really bright, really competent people who he knew would shine, and then he allowed them to. He gave them the support they needed, and he said, go forth and be great. And he didn't say, oh, no, you can't do it that way because I do it this way. He recognized that they could grow into themselves and being great and not necessarily do it exactly like he does.
Yeah, I love it.
And, so that's important. And that's important in whatever dynamic you're in. It could be in your family. It could be with your kids.
Oh my gosh, yes. Right, when couples are arguing around the correct way to load the dishwasher or fold the towels or these type of things that
And why, right? If the dishes come out of the dishwasher clean and somebody puts them away, who cares how it was put in the dishwasher?
right, and you have your whoever it's like the cooperation and the collaboration is the goal, and that's more important to feel like there's shared contributions. So,
Absolutely.
Michelle, I know that you have so much to offer here as far as the bending time framework. I also know you have the SWORD analysis. How would you,
Yes.
we don't have a ton of time, so how would you like to focus? Do you want to finish talking more about the art of bending time, or would you like to describe some of the SWORD?
It's part of the same thing. Great. So I've described to you what's the basics, which is what I call a busyness detox.
Ah,
And there were two like hardcore time management parts of that, which I didn't talk about with you, but I'll just give you the context.
okay.
Those are I call them time suck ninja skills. One has to do with your internalized time sucks. That's things like, what do you do to self-soothe? If something's hard, if something's boring, if something's, you don't want to do it. You don't want to have the hard conversation. Or you don't want to do your accounting because you hate doing accounting. And I can procrastinate to the end of this and like forever if I don't feel like getting into my accounting, right? But how many people like you procrastinate for so long that the project takes longer because you forgot about what the stuff was or where the paperwork was or right? Because if you let it go too long, you have to recreate your expense reports or whatever that thing is. That if you did it then and you were focused about it in a really easy way, it wouldn't get hard. You made it hard because you avoided it. So learn to identify those things and then create habits around building it into your schedule so they get done. And then the other is what I call external time sucks, which is environmental things. And that can involve the people around you. It can involve, for instance, if you have, a boss who comes in on Friday and drops a project on your desk at 4 o'clock every week and is like, oh, I need this on Monday. And you find yourself like tearing your hair out trying to meet your family's obligations. How do you politically handle that nicely and work with that person to support their need to know what their workflow is in a way that you don't end up in that situation on Friday?
Yes.
How do you, for instance, what if there's noise that distracts you, or there's light that distracts you, or clutter? For some people, like just having a cluttered workspace can cause them to be less efficient. And that can go into your home as well. You don't have a lot of time. It makes you feel crazy that you've got garbage all over your house. You've got kids dropping a path. They drop their stuff wherever they walked. The shoes are in one place. When I was a kid, we lived in Minnesota, and my mom finally came up with a way to solve the shoe problem, which was that she put a box on the far side of our unheated garage. And if our shoes were on the floor, they got put in the box. And we'd get up in the morning and, Mom, where'd my shoes go? Over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We learned fast.
Yes, I'll say that.
Frozen shoes in Minnesota are no joke. But anyway, you learn to find ways to work with the people around you and find ways to work with the environment around you to get what you need. If you have glaring sunlight in your eyes, get blinds or reorient your desk. It's amazing the kinds of things that I learned from people interrupting their ability to get their work done. Sometimes it's a home office and the kids come home from school. Sometimes, it can be various things. But whatever that is, there's usually some way you can solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very personal, and different people's lives.
Yeah. And if partners and couples are able to identify this, and sometimes it takes a bit of reflection
Yeah.
to recognize what's getting in the way, what's interfering, and then to be able to communicate and perhaps negotiate together to support each person's different ways in which help them be in that state of flow. Okay.
So now we get to the SWOT analysis, and this is where this works really well. And I wanted to get you through those parts because this all comes together really nicely.
Great.
When you do a SWOT analysis, it is an analysis of what I call a big hairy goal, one of those 1 to 3 to 5 or 10-year big goals that you have. And, as a couple, you want to have goals like that. So you're working together towards some things and you feel like you're both participating in something important in your lives.
Mm-hmm.
As a family, you want to have that with children involved so the children feel like they're part of it.
Nice.
And you want to have them as in your team at work, as an individual. This can be used in all those contexts.
Got it.
So you take the goal, and the first thing you look at, the S is for strengths. The strengths are what you already have. So let's say that you have a goal as a family of buying a vacation home at a place that you all love. You love going to, let's say you love to hike in the mountains and you want to have a vacation home hiking in the mountains and spending time there for weekends and summers and whatever. And so, your strengths are, at this point, let's say you've taken several vacations to the area, you love the area, you know what things you like to do there, you have a sense of what the region is like and where you might want to go. Maybe you've met a real estate agent and you have somebody to help you and you're getting your information together and you know what that is, you know what the cost is going to be, that kind of thing. If you don't know that, that's at this point, part of your weaknesses, right? So that's the beginning, is just having the information you need to be realistic about it. Because for a lot of people, if you just have the vision in your head of a house in the desert, it's nothing unless you have reality, right?
Yes.
So you want to know what those things are. Then the next step is what I look at is weaknesses. That's the gap.
Mm-hmm.
That's things like, how much money do you have to save to have the down payment? Maybe you do need to do research and find out more information. Start actually looking at properties. Start, making relationships in places or trying places. Maybe you want to go and rent an Airbnb several different weekends and try different locations and see what they're like so that you have more knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to opportunities of this. Well, what are the opportunities of owning this place? It's, to some extent, it may be an income investment. You might be able to rent it out. It may be that you just really, really need a place to decompress and to have fun together. And this is the place where your kids actually talk to you and you have fun and you do activities, right? And you ride horses or go hiking or whatever it is you do. What are the risks? There can be big risks to this kind of thing.
Yes.
This house that is a second property may mean that you're spending a bunch of time maintaining it, or it costs enough more that you have to give up things to have it. And there are things that you care about. And if you have it, you feel like you have to spend your time there, which means you're not going to take vacations to other places that you've wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
So you go through this whole analysis. And if this is like a family goal and your kids are older than toddlers, include them.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you include them, you might hear things from them that you're not thinking of yourself. Like, well, Mom, if I have to spend every weekend at this house, how am I going to go to my friends' birthday parties?
Right.
And now they feel like you don't care about them because you're picking the house over them having relationships with their friends or whatever that might be. You want everybody's buy-in.
Yes.
And, not for everything, but certainly if this is a family-oriented goal, You want to make sure it's a family-oriented positive and not a family-oriented, oh, we weren't really taking into account what their needs were, and now they're resentful and angry every time we leave on Friday,
Right.
right? So, what happens when I have people go through this analysis, the next thing I do after we've done those 4 is we go to the D, which is for desire. And I say 0 to 10, how much do you want it?
Mm.
And I wait. And sometimes I get, oh, I don't know, a 6 or a 7, or I get a 10, or I get, very rarely do I get lower than a 5. And I think that's frankly because people are embarrassed to come to me with their big goal and then tell me that they don't want it at all, like that it's that bad.
Right.
But like if it's in a 6 or 5 to 7 range, if it's not an 8 or higher, I suggest people look at that really carefully before they
Mhm.
consider it their big life goal.
Right.
And we go a little deeper into why is this your goal? And a lot of times it's not because they care that much about it. It's because maybe their parents had a vacation home, so they think they should. Or all the people they work with have a vacation home because that's part of like the expected, you know, path. You have the fancy house and the fancy car, and the next thing is the vacation home or the yacht or whatever. And so they're kind of like keeping up with the Joneses more than they're doing something that matters to them personally. And they're spending a whole lot of time and money and effort in the process.
No
When you
kidding.
cut out those things that don't matter, it's shocking how much happier your life gets.
Right. And how much easier it is to contend with things that didn't get addressed when you address the things that matter most.
Exactly.
And I appreciate just thank you for laying this out briefly. I know you could talk extensively about this sort analysis. And I can appreciate that even if the answer is below 4, like the how much desire someone has, that's a very useful exercise. It prevents making huge investments of time, energy, and money into something that doesn't really matter and how much of a
Right.
drain that is.
Think about how much of a burden it would put on your family if you and your spouse, in a really well-meaning effort, go through all the lengths it takes to buy a vacation home somewhere, and then your kids don't want to go with you and make it hell every time you want to go.
Right, right.
Think about that. I mean,
Or
my
just the
God.
fantasy of like,
And that's
oh,
the place that you've chosen because you think it's gonna make a great, like, family experience, and then you find out that, Johnny is afraid of snakes and Mary hates being outside, and neither of them is interested in going there because they don't wanna do that on their weekends.
exactly. Then as you mentioned, like if one has had family tradition and the nostalgia, like the fantasy of what it would be like
Yes.
to own the home, that actually living into it without doing this sort analysis, that the actual lived real experience is way different than their
Yeah,
fantasy or the
and
nostalgia around it.
there are lots of ways you can have that experience without going to that length. You could be renting a place once in a while and see
Yeah.
how you like it.
Yeah.
And compromising that way versus diving off the deep end, so to speak. So a lot of people, that's one example, but there's so many. I mean, people getting graduate degrees they don't really need because their parents expected it of them.
Mhm.
So many people do that.
Yes.
They're in a very successful situation. It's not needed by them anymore. It's taking time away from their family and it's costing them money. They don't even like it, but they feel like they have to get the piece of paper because it's expected.
Or a couple who's uncertain or has ambivalence about becoming parents, that this could
Yeah.
be something to really unpack and explore. And this gives a lot of guidance. Thank you so, so much. I know we're winding down here. What would you like to kind of help people have maybe one takeaway or something that you want to mention before we pivot to how people can get in touch with you?
I would say the most important thing people can do ever, ever, ever is get that clarity really about at your core what lights you up. And as part of a couple, know that about each other and help each other get that.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is where it's a life well lived, because if we're living in accordance with what really matters in our health and our well-being, again, the other things can fall away. They're not pressing on us and feeling like we're not meeting up or measuring up when really we are living in alignment, and that awareness is so
Exactly.
key.
And sometimes we can shuffle what our responsibilities are around the house and that kind of thing based on those things that light us up. And that can take something that feels like a burden to one person, and it's not so bad for the other one.
Yeah.
My sister loves gardening. I hate gardening. My sister spends tons of time at her house gardening, and it's her escape and her joy, and she absolutely loves it. And I mean, I'm never going to be married to my sister, but if I was married to my sister and I was the one who had to do the garden, I would go crazy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's different things like that. Like if you're looking at how do we split up the stuff in the household?
Mm-hmm.
There are things that one person might absolutely love to do, and it may not be gender norm.
Right.
And so, we want to look at that too, because maybe when my ex and we owned a boat, we owned a 40-foot boat here in Miami. And when I left him, I moved to the boat and I lived on it for 8 years. And I kind of got into the mechanical stuff. I learned a lot.
Nice. I love that.
I didn't do a lot of hands-on, like I wanted to sort of, but not really. But I mean, I removed my water heater completely and reinstalled the replacement one. The only part I didn't do was put a fixed pipe on that I didn't have the tools for.
That's awesome.
Oh, and that's not like girly stuff, right? But I liked it. I felt like I was accomplishing something. It was like this big challenge and it was fun. And I never would have thought that, but it also fed, and this goes into the whole life thing. During that time frame, I became very successful in the realm of insurance coverage law for people with yacht claims.
Aha.
And the reason that I was sought after for that was because I had an understanding about boats and about
Right.
those mechanical things.
Yes.
And if I'd never sort of fed that side of me, I never would have had that business opportunity.
Totally. I love that example. It's wonderful. Well, Michelle, for people who want to learn more about your framework, where would you like to send people or invite them to connect with you?
Okay, if they're in the United States and if they're not driving their car right now, since this is a podcast, I always hesitate with the podcast.
It's true.
I have a text messaging service where you can send the word clarity to 33777. And that will get you to a sign up for a free community page. And in that community page, I have downloadable things like a guided meditation and journaling prompts to help you find the sparks that light you up. And I also have a form there for the SWOT analysis that people can download and use that form just to give them some guidance as they.
Excellent.
I believe I gave you my website connection, that kind of thing. Just put those in the show notes and then they can find me.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure to have the phone number for people who are driving and want to refer back to the show notes so it's easily accessible. And thank you, Michelle, for all that you've shared here today.
Well, thank you, Jessica. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining in today's conversation, again with Michelle Niemeyer. You will find all the links, today's key takeaways, the full transcript, and the relationship guide mentioned in the beginning at drjessicahiggins.com/podcast. Again, it is such an honor and a privilege to be the host here on this show, the Empowered Relationship Podcast, and to share this time with you. Until next time, I hope you take great care.